On today's episode of Gold Star Stories, I sit down with Paula Davis, a mother, an advocate, and a woman whose strength runs deeper than most will ever understand. Her son, Army Private First Class Justin Davis, was only 19 years old when he was killed in Afghanistan in 2006, just over a year after enlisting. He was Paula's only child, a vibrant, funny, music-blaring, people-loving force of nature who dreamed of becoming both a soldier and an action movie hero. Paula shares the story of Justin's boundless energy growing up, his fierce determination to serve despite her fears, and the devastating way she learned of his death. Not at her front door, but alone, in a hotel room, hundreds of miles from home. This episode is about sacrifice, but it's also about legacy. The way a mother keeps showing up year after year to ensure the world doesn't forget her son. It's raw, it's real, and it's the heartbeat of what Gold Star Stories was made to hold space for.
Marine Captain Brian Latendry died earlier this month in an explosion in Iraq. He was 27, a husband and father, and he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, a few miles from where he grew up. As America observes Memorial Day,
I have been directed by the President of the United States and the Commandant of the Marine Corps to inform you that today at 0530, your son was killed in action while in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Not very many of us can accomplish our goals or our dreams, and he always knew where he wanted to go, and he did it.
A Gold Star family is one who has lost a loved one serving in the United States military. It's a distinction no family ever seeks, a bond shared through sacrifice, remembrance, and profound loss. I'm Nick Latendry, and I've been a Gold Star sibling for over 18 years. In those 18 years, I've learned that while ceremonies fade, medals are stored away, and life continues, the story doesn't end for the families left behind. This podcast is dedicated to remembering those who gave everything for their country and to telling the lesser-known stories, the quiet, powerful journeys of grief, strength, resilience, and hope that follows after the flags are folded and the crowds disperse. These are Gold Star Stories. All right, so tell me a little bit about your son, and I want to get to know him a little bit growing up before he became the military man he was.
Justin was my only child. I was a single parent. He always was busy, hyper. He was always into something. He loved sports. He loved music. Growing up, he was born in Washington, D.C. We moved to Maryland when he was in the first grade. But he always wanted to be a part of something bigger than himself. He was the only child, but he was not your typical only child. He thrived off of being around lots and lots of people. So he was always off with his friends. He was always involved in some type of organized sports, team sports, anything where there were lots of people around. And he just loved it. And he always wanted to join the military from a young age. And it's strange to me because growing up, I kept these motivational signs hung up in his room. And it would say, Justin Davis, Dr. Justin Davis, scientist, Justin Davis, astronaut, Justin Davis, attorney at law. Never Justin Davis, General Justin Davis, or anything related to the military. I mean, he knew that I believed in education. And he was a big person. He loved life. He lived it to the fullest. He was always joking around. He loved being around people. He said, I can pretty much chill with anybody. And he loved all different types of friends. He had friends from almost every nationality, religion, and they loved him. And he just loved being around lots of different people. And even the parents of his friends would tell me how he was such a nice guy, and he would admire their flowers in the garden. And I'm thinking, he hated flowers. He told me he didn't like the way they smelled, but he told them, well, I love your flowers. And they just loved him.
Somebody must have raised him right then.
Well, I like to think that I did, but it kept him away from me a lot. He was always away because it was just me and him at home. And he wanted to be around people. And even when he was at home, he was playing his music loud, the rap music, the TV was always loud. He brought such a force and energy with him. He made everything stand out and pop. There's not a quiet moment with him. So yeah, he was always fascinated by the military, but I still did not think that he would actually commit to joining because he knew I education and college. But in the end, he said, this is what I want to do. This is my dream. He was not worried that the country was fighting 2 wars at the time. He said, Mom, I could get caught up in some BS here, be at the wrong place at the wrong time and lose my life. So I'm not going to put my dream on hold. This is what I want to do. I'm going in and I'm going in to fight. So being the only child, I thought there was some type of rule or law that he could not be sent to the front line because he wanted to be an infantryman. So I said, I'm going to explore that. And he went ballistic. Don't do anything to stop me from going to the front line. That's where I want to go. And then I found out later that law or rule doesn't even exist anymore. We had some very fierce debates about him going in. And the main thing was, you're my only kid. Why would you put yourself in harm's way? The country's fighting 2 wars. And I'll never forget, he said, Mom, that's not my problem. You should have had more kids. You're going to have to man up and be strong. And that was his mantra for life. Man up and be strong. And I said, I'm a mom. I don't want to man up. So eventually I came around to supporting him when I realized I could not talk him out of it. It was what was going to make him happy, and I wanted him to be happy. And he promised me that when he came out, he would use his GI Bill and go to college. He had this plan. He was going to UCLA. He was going to become an actor because he wanted to be an actor. He was going to be a action figure like Jet Li because he was into martial arts. So he had this plan, and I supported him. He was untaunted by the fact the country was at war. I supported his dream, but I wish he had taken a different path.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess, him going in and your initial, like, how long was he in before this happened?
He went in June. And he was killed in June. He had only been in a year. And I'll never forget when
He'd only been in the Army in general a
yes,
year.
He did his basic training.
God.
He did his basic training. He went to Fort Drum, and he was so excited. He called me. He said, Mom, I'm being sent to Fort Drum. That's one of the most deployed units in the military. He was excited. I'm going to war. I want to go. So he was over in Afghanistan. I think he went in like March. So he was only over there until June when he was killed. So he was in a little over, it was a little over a year he was in the military. And it's just, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain the loss.
Well, you had to have been living with so much stress prior to that, because it seems like leading up to it, you already had these anxieties
Yes.
of it. And even him going off to, basic training and stuff had to be a bit of a stress to you. And then him calling and saying, hey, I'm going to Fort Drum, had to just be like, come on.
Yes. I was very anxious. I had anxiety. I mean, I didn't want him to be worried about me. So I was excited. When he would call excited, I would be excited along with him. But I had a lot of anxiety because, well, on one hand, when I found out he was going to Afghanistan, all you heard about on the news was Iraq. So I'm thinking, good. There's not a lot going on over in Afghanistan. All the casualties and things we're hearing on the news is about Iraq. So he's in a safer place. That's what I thought. So, but I still was worried that I wouldn't hear from him, and then when you hear of casualties before even hearing whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, it would grip my heart because it's like, okay, I haven't heard from him, is he okay? So,
Can you tell me a little bit about the day you got the news?
oh my goodness. Everyone talks about the knock at the door. I didn't get a knock at the door. I was away for work in Wyoming. And I'll never forget when I had to go, I was like, I don't want to go. I live alone, my only kid. If something happens to him, I never thought he was going to be killed, but I thought if he got hurt, how are they going to find me? There's nobody, I don't tell my neighbors when I'm going out of town, and everyone kept saying, oh, you can't live your life like that. You go to work, you come home, you can't live like that, not going out of the city or going out of your area because something may happen. Where's your faith? You got to have faith. But I had this feeling I did not want to go. And when I got there, I couldn't wait for it to be over. And I had just got there, but I was thinking, I was praying, I can't wait to go back home. I just want to go back home. And on that Sunday evening, my sister called me and said, "Where are you?" And I said, "You know where I am." And, my family knew where I was. I said, "You know where I am. I'm in Wyoming." She said, "Well, the military is trying to get in touch with you." She said, "They left a number for you to call." So I called the number, and this lady said, "Well, where are you?" I said, "I'm in Wyoming." She said, "Are you alone?" I said, "Well, I'm here with my boss. I'm at a meeting." She said, "Okay, we're sending someone over to talk to you." And I said, Something wrong? Is something wrong with my son?" And she said, "We're sending someone to talk to you. They'll be there soon." So I think like every 15 minutes I was calling her back, and I told her, "I just want to go home. I just want to go home." And she told me, "No, you need to stay there. Someone will be there to talk to you." And she wouldn't answer any of the questions like, "Is he hurt? What's going on?" She just kept saying, "Someone will be there to talk to you." So on the third time I called, it dawned on me she's answering the phone saying Casualty Assistance Office. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that means somebody died. So I talked to one of Justin's friend's father who was active in the military. And he said, "Well, no, that could mean you're hurt on the field. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone died." So I'm holding on to that. So I'm thinking they're going to come. They're going to fly me to Germany because I knew that's where our injured military servicemen go. So I've got to check out of this hotel and wait for them to come get me. So I packed my stuff up. I checked out of the hotel, and I'm sitting in the lobby with my bag, waiting for them to come in and get me and fly me to the hotel or fly me to the hospital. I think like almost 2 hours passed. I'm sitting there, and my boss and the people who were there attending the meeting, everybody was surrounding me, waiting with me, what's going on. And finally, I seen this guy, and I found out later, Wyoming, I think, doesn't have a military station there, doesn't have any type of military presence. He had to come, I think, from Iowa. He had to come from far away. And he came in, he walked in with his Class A's on, and I seen him coming in. I got up out the chair and I ran over to him and I said, "I'm Paula Davis. I'm Justin Davis's mother." He said, "You're Miss Davis? You're Paula Davis?" I said, "Yes. Where's my son? What's going on?" He said, "Miss Davis, the United States," I think he said, "the United States military is sorry to inform you." And then I just went ballistics. "How do you know? How do you know it's him? How do you know?" And I just lost it. And I think from there I went into shock, just saying it can't be. How do you know? And I think finally I guess I realized that he was, telling me this. It wasn't a dream. So I'm like, "Well, I need to go home." And they said, "Well, my boss had been looking at airline tickets, and we found out the last plane out of Wyoming was at 7:00. It was past 7:00. So I'm thinking, okay, the military's going to fly me home? It's like, "No, your first flight out is tomorrow morning. You're going to have to stay here." So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to stay right here till tomorrow morning. I think we were going to leave at 6:00. She told, my boss made all the arrangements. She said, "We'll leave out." I think the earliest flight was at 8 or something. So I'm going to stay here in this hotel lobby with my suitcase waiting. And the hotel personnel said, "Ma'am, you can't stay here in the lobby all night. You need to check back into your room." So I went back to my room. I stayed up all night. I called some friends, and they would all call me back and said, "Woody, I want to make sure I heard what you said." I had already talked to my family when we were in the hotel lobby because they wanted to come out and get me. And I told them, "No, well, my boss explained to them she had made reservations for us. We would be leaving in the morning." So it was just like, I'm surprised I didn't have a heart attack because my heart was coming out of my chest, and just spending the night in that hotel room waiting for daybreak.
You were essentially, I mean, I know you had your coworkers with you, but you were alone in that hotel room, correct?
Yes, yes. My
That had to
boss
be
offered to stay with me. She said, "Do you want me to stay with you?" And I said, you know, like I said, I know I was in shock, but I didn't want her to stay with me. I don't know. I just wanted to be alone. I had already been in the hotel lobby all that time
yeah.
and just trying to process everything. So I stayed there until as soon as daybreak, I was up and dressed. And actually, I never took my clothes off. And I was ready to go the next morning. And we went to the airport. So that was
That
my
is,
notification. And when I came home, my neighbor said they only had my work number for some reason. They didn't have my uh, cell phone number. And they said the military had came out that morning and stayed till that evening. And it was pouring down rain, and they just waited and waited and waited. And they didn't know my neighbors didn't know where I was, and they were there waiting to give me the notification. So I got my knock at the door in a hotel in Wyoming.
that is absolutely absurd to me. Not in, it's just, I'm sorry. That's how it happened to you.
Yes.
I can't imagine everything that you had going through your head at that moment.
Yes, it was bizarre. I think being in shock helped. You're just going through the motions.
So you fly home the next morning, and what are the next steps for you? I mean, you're the sole person in charge of everything here. You've lost everything, and now you're also you got a lot of weight that's also now put on you.
Yes.
So how do you navigate that?
Well, when I came home, word had spread. The whole neighborhood, I live in a townhouse development. The street was filled with friends and family. And I hadn't heard that Sunday when I came home, I still hadn't heard back from the military. So on Monday, I still hadn't heard anything back from the military. So I'm just
I'm
like,
sorry. They told you, and then you went 2 days without hearing anything.
yes, yes. I was back home waiting for someone to contact me because I didn't know what to do. And finally, I received a call. I had been assigned a casualty assistance officer. I believe that was on Tuesday. I got back Sunday. And from there, he got the ball rolling. So many decisions to be made. So many things that had to be done. And then you don't have a body yet. So you want to make arrangements. And it was just a lot. It was overwhelming. I wanted to go to Dover. And then I was advised by my casualty assistance officer not to go to Dover because it was a chance that you may not get in. I think at the time you weren't really allowed, but he was also saying your loved one may not even be on the flight. But anyway, I was deterred from going to Dover. Then Fort Drum, where my son deployed from, was having a memorial service for the soldiers that had been killed in that week. So we decided to go there. So we went there, and then it was the 4th of July, and then his body was picked up by the funeral home. So it was a lot of decisions to be made, and I had family and friends to help me with that. But looking back, I wish I could do a do-over, because you just don't have time to think. And so I tried to advocate, this is what I want. I want this, I want that. And it all worked out because I knew that he had talked about being buried in Arlington, or not being buried. He talked about Arlington being a place where all the heroes were buried. So he had never talked about the what ifs. What if you don't make it back? We never, ever touched on that subject because I believed he was coming back. So we don't need to talk about that. And I assumed he knew that too, or he believed that too, because he never brought it up. So it was a lot. It was a lot. We were concerned about the Westboro Baptist Church coming out, and my casualty assistance officer said, well, the Patriot Guard want to come. And I was like, oh, that'd be great. He said, well, no, I don't think you need them because the church people won't be allowed to come but so close to Arlington. And like I said, you look back, I would have loved for the Patriot Guard to have been there to escort him because he loved motorcycles. Decisions have to be made quickly. You don't have time to think about it. And thank God I had family and friends to help me so I could bounce things off of them. But it's all, you can't even grieve yet because you have these decisions that have to be made.
Are you comfortable telling me about how he died?
Yes, I'm not comfortable with it, but I will tell you. First, they told me he was under attack by someone that they were being followed by. Then I was told that he was hit with a mortar They were aiming for the group that was following them, and they got the coordinates wrong. So basically, his death certificate does not say friendly fire. And I never even knew what that word meant. I heard it before, but I didn't know. So the story is that they were being followed. They called for a mortar attack. They got the coordinates wrong. So the blast of the coordinates is what caused him to pass away. And they were on their way back from a mission. They had been out for 30 days. I talked to him before he went. He said, Mom, you're not going to hear from me for a while. I'm going on a mission. Don't worry. I'll be safe. I said, yeah, watch your back. And neither one of us want to say goodbye. And I said, you say goodbye first. He said, no, you say goodbye first. So finally I said, okay, you be safe. And he said, I'll call you when we get back. And that was the last time I heard from him. So hadn't heard from him or spoken to him in 30 days, but they were on their way back from a mission.
So I know that you were a constant presence every time we went to Section 60. And I know that for a lot of the moms, Section 60 becomes a very huge source of healing because
Yes.
that's where you find other people that have these shared experiences. Have you made decent connections with some of the other families at 60?
Yes, I have. I've met a lot of family members at 60. I would say that was the best therapy for me, was being at Section 60. I needed to be there. At first, I was there because I needed to understand that this really did happen, because my son's name was on that gravestone. So this really did happen. And by going there so often, I ran into other moms whose loved ones were buried in the same row. We were neighbors. I had to pass a Marine mom. Her son was buried at the end. As a matter of fact, I think he's right in front of Brian, Eric Hertzberg. His mom would be there. And then on the other side of me was a lady, Zarmar. Her son was in the Army, and we were all there at the same time. And we started communicating and talking and sharing and encouraging each other. And that did more for me. It validated what I was feeling, that I wasn't going crazy. And we all just shared, and we were all at the same place at the same time, going through the same things. And that went on for many years. And as life takes us all in different directions, I don't go as often anymore. I go once a month because I feel like I need to make sure his grave is taken care of. That was his last resting place. And that's the last thing I can do for him, is to make sure he has flowers. And also go there is still a form of therapy for me, to meditate and reflect. It's been almost 19 years, June 25th, and I'm still standing. I can't believe I wasn't locked up in an insane asylum. And those moms, we held each other up and helped each other through that time. And now we've all, kind of gone off and doing other things. We're still in touch. We still have that bond. And I think most Gold Star families have that bond. Without even saying anything, you have that bond that you've lost a loved one who served in the military. So it's not the same. Things change. I used to feel the need to go often. I just had to go, had to be there. And now I'm okay. I mean, even if I was going out of town, I would ask family members, could you please go? Friends, could you please go? I want to make sure his flowers are there. And now it's not an urgency. I want to go, and I do go. It's still a form of therapy for me, but I don't feel bad if I don't go. So we've all joked and said we'll be in our knees in wheelchairs, and somebody will have to push us up to our son's graves, because that's just a part of our lives now. I always say grief and joy can coexist.
That is very true. And it's hard, especially to my kids, to explain. My kids are 8 and 10. So when they see me crying and talking about my brother, it's like, it's not the same as like sad tears, It's like I'm living these memories. He's heavy in me right now, And I enjoy it, you know what I mean? I don't enjoy it, I don't like crying necessarily, but I enjoy feeling close to him. And feeling those emotions so strong that it could make me physically well up and cry. That's the closest I can be to him right now. And my kids are starting to fully understand the weight of it this year. I feel like this is probably the first year that they've really, I've got all this stuff up behind me, and they've walked they've walked by it so many times in their lives, but I don't think they've fully like understood what it was that Uncle Brian did. Who Uncle Brian was growing up. They know, the kind of brother he was to me. They know all that kind of stuff, but they don't know him as like the hero that he is. And this year, my son, who has his exact name, is understanding exactly who this guy was. And he's just like, wow. And that's what I want to be able to do for everybody now, is just these stories as the years go by, and, you read about a blurb on a website and it says, hey, this is the battalion they were in. This is all that kind of stuff. It's a bunch of numbers.
Yes.
It doesn't give me the story. It doesn't give me who they were as a person. They turn into a name on a wall at a certain point, and I refuse to let that happen to my brother or anybody else that I know when we still have the ability to document this, share these stories like we are. Have you had a chance at all to connect with TAPS or any of those organizations?
Yes, I have. I've gone to several TAPS seminars. I've gone to their convention. I didn't learn about TAPS until probably a couple of years after my son's passing. I became active in the Maryland Gold Star Moms. It's a service organization. We do a lot of volunteer work with veteran service organizations. We do a lot of work helping veterans. So serving is, especially with our veterans, it means a lot to me. So I like the fact that I'm still serving like my son was serving by being involved with veteran service organizations and organizations that recognize and honor our fallen. That helps keep them alive, their memories alive, because I believe most Gold Star families, if not all, we share that feeling that we don't want our loved ones' sacrifices to be forgotten. And we have that fear. The world's going on, and thank God we're not fighting any wars now. Their sacrifices will be forgotten. So I think we all share that. And being active in organizations like TAPS and organizations like the Gold Star Mothers, they help with that.
For me, TAPS was like the first time I actually met somebody that was like, hey, they got the same opinion as me on stuff, and I'm not crazy. So
Validation. It validates you. You're not going, you think you at some point I really thought I was going crazy, but then when I met Gold Star moms, other Gold Star moms, I realized, no, I'm not going crazy. There are other people out here like me who are going through the same thing. And that validates that, it's okay. It's okay. It's part of grief. You carry someone for 9 months, they're part of your blood. It's unnatural for your kid to die before you. They're supposed to bury you. And my son was my only child. So that means no grandkids. That's it. What do you do now? It's like, got to find a purpose. I strive to be a blessing to others, try to, encourage others because of my experience with grief and with the loss of a child. So it's still that hole in the heart. It's still that wound that's never going to heal, but you can live with it. And that's how I'm able to, continue to live on. Like I said, 19 years and I'm still standing. I would have never, ever thought I could have survived this long. The hurt, the pain was so great. I just didn't even want to survive that. It's just like, how do I live with that? And here it is, 19 years later, and my faith played a big part in that. Played a big part. So anytime I get a chance to talk about my son, his sacrifices, and the other sacrifices of our fallen heroes, I consider it an honor and a duty because there's so many stories attached to our loved ones that people need to hear about. Funny stories. He wasn't an A student. He couldn't wait to get out of school. I tried to talk him into going to college. Because he was in ROTC in high school. I said, you go to college, go into the military as an officer. And he's like, no, I'm sick of school. I'll go when I finish my time in the military. He was so determined. And then, as much as he loved going to school for friends. All his friends was, let's go. And he played football. He was on the football team. He loved sports. And the first thing he did when he came home from basic training, he was all buffed and, he ran to the school. The school that he didn't like being there for classes, he wanted them to see him in all his glory. He's got on his tight t-shirt and he's all buffed up and he's this Rambo type guy now. And that's, he always thought of himself as the good guy. He goes in and saves the day, like a Rambo guy type guy. His friends told me he was their moral compass a lot of times. He would be the one to say, nah, man, we ain't doing that. Now, he did some things. He got into trouble as a kid and as a teenager, but he played that. He would let his friends know, we can't do that. Or they said he was the one to say, nah, we're not doing that,
Well,
All of his friends went to college or they did other things. He was the only one that went into the military. And that was what he wanted to do. And he wasn't going to let anybody deter him from doing what he wanted to do. And he came from a lot of military service in my family, a legacy of service. He never heard them really talk about their service. He knew they were in the service, but it was just from a young kid, that was what he was intrigued, dressing up as G.I. Joe for Halloween. He played with the G.I. Joes and other super hero action figures. So, that was just his destiny, I think. That and to become an actor. And it's funny because he was on the front line. He sent me these funny videos, doing martial arts and stuff, and the old martial arts movies where your mouth is moving and the words. He did these movies and I said, how do you get time to do that? You're on the front line. He said, Mom, we have a lot of downtime. And they were so funny. So I always think of him working on his craft why he was there. He was going to be this actor. He was, working on his craft while he was on the front line. In between fighting, he was acting. And I
see,
look at those videos and they make you laugh. It's just,
I love hearing those stories because to me, and I think from a lot of outsiders, you think of these guys that have sacrificed themselves and you think of them as this like prim and proper hero.
Oh,
And that's not the case. These are
furthest from the truth.
These are your best friends. These are your
Yes.
siblings. These are real people that really gave their lives. And I
Yes.
think unless
Yes.
you know somebody that's really like, giving it their all, that's probably kind of part of the picture in your mind is, oh, they were this, perfect,
Yes.
military soldier. And no, I know exactly who my brother was. I know the kind of jokes he made, the way he used to beat me up. I still loved him for it. That's everything he was. But I want to make sure other people remember him for that too, because I know that he would not necessarily want to be remembered as this, military figure. I think he'd want to be remembered for who he was in general.
Yes.
He was a lot more than just a Marine Corps captain, as your son was too. He was a lot more than just,
Yes.
a soldier.
Yes. He was a mixture. He had a side he liked to call himself, I'm a young soldier, I'm out here on these missions and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm jumping out of planes with the CIA. I mean, he would embellish all these things he's doing. Growing up, he would be out doing things, some things he shouldn't be doing. And, so he was not a perfect human being. He would go to church with me and I go to a traditional Baptist church and he said, Mom, their services are too long. And he said, I prefer going to church with my friends. Their services are short. He would go to church with his friends. I was just glad he was going, but he would go to the church with his friends because their services were short. Then when the church had a missionary trip to the Bahamas, he said he wanted to go. And I was like, oh, I'm really happy you want to go on a missionary trip. Mom, all those girls going to be there? It's like... So, he had a very funny side to him. He kept everybody laughing. I remember one of his classmates came up to me and said she was the new girl in school. And he came up to her and made her feel so welcome, in high school. She didn't have any friends and he made her so welcome. And one of his teachers also told me she was out one day and they had a substitute teacher and he took over the class and made everybody just stop, giving this substitute teacher a hard time, and they listened to him. He commanded respect, they knew he liked to have a good time. He liked to have fun, but he knew when it was time to be respectful. And, I've been told all kinds of stories like that. And
I tell my mom often that I love when people approach us with a
Hmm.
story that they had that we hadn't heard before because it
Hmm.
breathes new life into them completely. It's just a part of them you'd never heard about. And I feel like, especially 19 years on, a lot of people just won't approach us anymore with these stories because they're like, oh, I've held on to them so long, or I don't know how to approach, I don't know how to start the conversation.
Or they feel like they may upset you.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but I want to hear them.
Oh, I do too. Yes.
Like I'm
Yes.
not, you might make me teary eyed,
Yes.
but that's not me being mad at you or me being sad. That's me just taking it in and just being like, oh, this is, getting to, understand him more,
It happened to me the other day. I seen a lady with a blue shirt on. I don't know if you heard of Wear Blue, Run to Remember.
I have not.
It's an
I've been
organization.
out of this for a minute, so I'm just now getting back into the Gold Star thing. I had to step away for a little bit.
Yeah, I understand. It's an organization they run in honor of the fallen, and it's called Wear Blue. They wear a blue T-shirt, and it has on the Run to Remember. And I seen her with the shirt on because I've done the honor mile at the Marine Marathon. They have the pictures of fallen in this mile that the runners run through, and then we're standing there with the big American flags waving them on, and I stand on the honor mile, and I volunteered. This was through Wear Blue, and I said, "Oh, do you run with Wear Blue?" And she said, "Oh," she said, "Well, I have." She said, "Are you in the military?" And that's when I told her, "No, my son." And she said, "Oh no," she said, "I knew your son." She said, "I remember bringing him home one day and some guy cut me off and said something. And your son, your son said, Miss, I forgot her name, Miss so and so, you want me to handle that for you?" She said, he was ready to get out of the car. And I told him, "No, no, that's okay." She said, "I was at his funeral." And I didn't know the lady.
Mhm.
That shirt made me ask her, did she run? And she had a story to tell about him. And that just made my day. And I told her, "You just made my day. That's not a story I'd ever heard before."
It really does make your day. You just go on the rest of the day just thinking about it. It's letting
Yeah.
it breathe new life into it. And I know
Yes.
there's so many stories out there, and there's so many people that haven't connected with me and my family because I just, when my brother died, I immediately went off to college like 2 months later. So I didn't get a chance to connect with a lot of these memorial events or anything like that. I have none of the guys he serves with are in contact with us anymore. Nothing like that. So it's been a few years now since I think I've heard a new story, and I know they're out there.
Mhm.
This is me fishing for them, I guess. Bring them to me, and bring them to Paula too. Paula wants to hear them too. If anybody's
Yes.
got stories about Justin, I'm sure that she would love to hear them also. So, how do you see yourself now, Paula? We're kind of 19 years on. Obviously, you're still a Gold Star mom. What
Mhm.
is your mission now for this? You feel like you've found yourself outside of being a Gold Star parent? I know that's identity in this
Mhm.
is a big thing. You fall into this, it's not something we asked for. And
Mhm.
then there's a lot of public expectations for us to live up to everything. Do
Mhm.
you feel like you've navigated that correctly? You feel like you kind of are your own person at this point?
Yes, because I realize everybody grieves differently. Everyone is unique in how they're living their lives in spite of our loss. And that's a big part of who I am. My son's sacrifice. Like I said, he was my only kid. But I learned how to navigate, I think, being a Gold Star mom and being a good human being. I think it's a choice you have. You either, you go through changes, I think, in seasons. And right now I'm at a season where, coming up on 19 years, I'm still here. I've survived, but I still have purpose left. Just being able to share my experiences and help others. I think that helps me deal with that loss, that if anything good can come out of it, I'm able to help someone else. I know he loved to help other people, especially the underdog. So I get comfort from knowing that I'm carrying on his mission of helping others who may be less fortunate or who just need an ear to listen to their stories. So I think, like I said, joy and grief can coexist. I'm just not a Gold Star mom, but I'm also a human being who has other parts of her life. Being a Gold Star mother is a big part, but it's not the only part of who I am.
Well said. Is there any other stories you'd like to share with me before we stop this today?
Well, I would say, I will always miss him. He had this thing, he filled up the home, and with him being gone, I miss that so much. He was so loud. With the music, with the TV, playing the video games, that's the coming home to that quietness. It always strikes me that even though when he was gone off to boot camp, you know, it was quiet, but I knew there was this is just a season. This is just a part of time while he's gone, he's coming back. But it's a permanent silence now that it's just hard to get used to. Even 19 years, it's hard to get used to. So I just thank you for doing this because I'm the type of person I remember when he passed. And I know, like I said, grief is different for everyone. I wanted to talk to anyone. I mean, I was grieving, but I also knew I needed to tell someone about this wonderful person, my son. So anybody with a listening ear, newspaper, radio, I'm here. I'm going to talk about my son. I want the world to stop. I want them to listen to what I have to say about my son. I don't care, line them up, the reporters. I want to tell the world about my son. This is my time to share him to the world while I have this opportunity. And, always felt like I really didn't take the time, even now, 19 years later, to grieve because it was always something. It was always something that had to be done. His items came back like 2 months after his death. And at that time, you had to go through every single thing. He had like 50 DVDs. They went through every title. It took all day to go through all his stuff. That was draining. And then there were other things. Then there was the military report on what had happened. I think he died in June and they came in November. It was like a 6 team came in with a notebook to explain from A to Z what had happened. That was in November. And then there was always, it seemed to be something. And I'm one that whenever I'm invited for anything that they're honoring our veterans or our loved ones or both, as much as I can, I'm going to be there. That's so important to me that we honor our military, honor our fallen. That, running all over and sometimes different states because I felt like my presence needed to be there to stand in to say, yes, this person lived, this person died, and he deserves to be remembered. That was almost like an obsession with me. I think if I had been invited to go to the Antarctic or Timbuktu, I would have found a way to go because I want to be there to recognize and honor my son and the other sacrifices that are made. And even now, that's important to me that they're honored and not forgotten because I'm thankful that we're not in another war, that there's no war going on. But I don't want people to ever forget all these men and women that stepped forward. There is no draft. They willingly said, okay, sign my name on the line. I'm willing to sacrifice for this country, even if it means I'll die. And that's something I think we need to be constantly reminded of. I've always said, Justin thought everybody should serve. He thought everyone needed to serve. He said, everybody can't carry a gun. Everybody can't shoot, but everybody can do something. And that's how he felt. And now I feel the same way. Everybody can do something. Everybody can do something for their country.
Mhm.
We used to talk about the draft. And I said, well, now I feel like if we were to go to war again, I know this probably won't happen, but I would want the draft to come back. So everybody shares in this burden. Everyone should have to share it. Doesn't matter. I mean, I know the rich and powerful will always find a way to opt out. But this beast called social media will let everyone know who's opting out and who the rich and powerful that are able to stop their loved ones from going in. I just feel like we need to share this burden together.
I see what you mean because that would stop a lot right there.
Yeah, by
We
any
would
means
we would think twice
necessary.
about going to war
Yeah,
if it was going to put you out there and
if
call you
your
out.
loved one was
Yep.
going to have to serve, oh yeah. And that's why, I wish they bring the draft back. Every man and woman, everybody, let's share in this burden. This is our country. Let us all support our country. And I just
And if
hope,
not, then let's at least understand what the sacrifice is that the people that have signed their name on the line and made the ultimate sacrifice. You know what I mean?
yes.
Let's respect it, and let's keep talking about it. My media falls off of these stories very quickly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
They'll jump on it again for Memorial Day. We'll get a few weeks there where it's, hey, we feel good. Maybe we'll get another one on 4th of July if we're lucky. Come Veterans Day, sometimes they'll throw in some stuff. These stories, there's so many Gold Star families that need a place to tell their story. Their story deserves to be told without a political theater, without anything else to it, without CNN, NBC, Fox News. I don't need that. I just need something that's purely about the families and the fallen. So that, years from now when my kid's like, oh, you're named after your uncle? What's that all about? He can just be like, hey, check out this video that my dad made, and it'll fill you in on exactly who I was named after and, all that kind of stuff. So it's ambitious. I get it. I do this. It's just kind of how my world is. I do ambitious things and just try to see how it pans out. And, Paul, most of the time it works out well for me. So I'm really hoping this one works out well too. I hope that we get a bunch of people behind us that see the value in listening to these Gold Star mother stories and the Gold Star spouses, the siblings, understand that if we get behind pushing these stories out to everybody, that maybe the world can think of things a little differently. And we can find other resolutions to the conflicts that we have.
I'm just afraid that, as Americans, we have such short-term memory. The war is over. Let's move on. That was a long time ago, but it needs to be kept in the forefront. Sacrifices that have been made needs to be in the forefront. Doesn't matter what your political affiliations are. These are stories that need to be heard and told. And I wish more people were like you that would, seek out the families that want to tell their stories about their loved ones, because for me, talking about him helps keep his memory alive. And I'm one of those ones, I'm like, oh, you get me started. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, got one more thing to tell you about that funny time. I'm like the one that keeps going on and on and on, that I can't read the room. People's eyes start to glaze over, because I want to keep talking about him. I want people to know who he was. He just wasn't, like you said, he wasn't just a soldier. He was a funny guy. He was a good friend. He wanted to be an actor. He played football. There were other aspects of his life than just going into the military.
Before I started this, I started thinking, is there somebody else who could do this better than me? And I'm like, there's people that have better voices, there's better looking people, but I'm not sure that anybody else has the Gold Star sibling experience, necessarily that I had, to where, as a Gold Star sibling, we kind of sit back and we watch the grieving process of everybody else. Nobody necessarily checks in on us.
On the siblings, they're the forgotten.
But we're sitting back and we're watching, mom grieve. We're watching the spouse grieve. We're watching, everybody. And I just got to the point where I'm like, I have such crazy empathy, like to a fault at this point. I'm like, this puts me in a position. I want to hear the stories. First off, I'm genuinely curious. I don't get bored listening to these stories. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I can make sure that everybody else feels the same way that I feel about it. So I can go on and on, but we'll go ahead and stop this here, Paula. This was a fantastic interview. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. And if we ever get a chance again to do this, my goal is eventually to grow this to the point to where we get somebody to come and just help pay for these interviews and let us be able to go and like truly do this the right way, go in person and have a full on conversation to where it's not like, this remote, which don't get me wrong, we connected perfectly fine remotely just now, but I feel like the connections are deeper, to be able to do it on a more professional level. Not to mention trying to get my mom to do this FaceTime interview thing like this was a nightmare. So,
oh, really?
You handled it quite well.
I was nervous and I didn't sleep well last night.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, but hopefully it wasn't as bad as you thought it would be.
No, it wasn't. It's like talking to a friend. You were like talking to a friend. You made me very comfortable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And if you hear of any other Gold Star moms or anything like that want to talk to us, please send them my way.
Oh, I certainly will.
My wife and I are doing this. We're all in on it. It takes quite a bit of time to get these edited and stuff, but it's one of those things where we just don't want to stop. We have momentum right now. We have the time, so we're just going to go all in on it. That concludes our interview with Paula Davis. Now, before we raise our glass, I just want to say this. Paula is the epitome of grace. She's carried a weight that most of us can't begin to understand. The loss of her only child, her son, her whole world, and yet she shows up. For other families, for veterans, for her community, she shares Justin's story, not just to remember him, but to remind us all what real sacrifice looks like, what real love sounds like. Talking to her was more than an interview. It was an honor. To Private First Class Justin Davis, a son, a friend, a teammate, a protector. A young man who chose service not out of obligation, but out of passion. He didn't wait for peace. He ran toward the fire. He joined the fight knowing full well the cost, and he did it with a grin, a joke, a big heart, and a dream of becoming the next action hero on the big screen. He was loud. He was larger than life, and he made everyone around him feel like they mattered. The moral compass in his friend group, the kid who brought joy to the classroom, the soldier who wanted to be on the front lines because he believed in something bigger than himself. And to Paula Davis, a mother who gave her only child to this country, who has stood tall through grief so heavy it could crush most. She didn't get a knock at the door. She got a phone call in a hotel room states away from home, alone. And yet here she is, still standing, 19 years later, speaking his name, telling his story, serving veterans, lifting up other Gold Star families, choosing light when the darkness would have been easier. Paula is proof that grief doesn't silence love. It amplifies it. So we raise our glass, not just to Justin, the young man who ran towards the fight, but to Paula, the mother who carries his legacy forward with grace, grit, and the kind of love that refuses to be forgotten. To Justin, to Paula, to all the ones who gave everything, and to the ones they left behind still fighting to keep their memory alive. Say their names. Private First Class, Justin Davis. If this conversation moved you, don't let it end here. Share this episode, talk about it with someone. Help us bring these stories out of the shadows and into the hearts of every American who says they'll never forget. We can't do this alone. Gold Star Stories is a labor of love, built in our home, funded out of pocket, and driven by a mission that runs through our bones. If you believe in this work and want to help us keep going, please consider sponsoring an episode, connecting us with a brand who can, or donating at goldstarsstoriesusa.com. I'm Nick Latendry. Thanks for listening. Until next time, check in on your people, live with purpose, and always say their names.